G'day friends and fans, welcome to Day Talks of Ukraine War Update for the 13th of August 2026. I'm your host, the author David Applegate, author of the books The Boyhood of Cain, Power Games, Into the Elsebound and Erotic Tales from the Empire. As the war continues, I'll continue to bring you comprehensive news and updates from both sides of the war, regardless of what the regarded trolls say. They're naysayers, the pro-Ukrainian glazers. There seems to be a lot of people who don't pay attention beyond the first 2 minutes of my videos. They don't want the truth. The truth is there is rarely any sign of anyone's victory. Despite that, they just want to hate on anyone who doesn't tell them the narratives they want to hear. They should just go stick their head in a booth and talk to themselves all day, because that's the only conversation they're going to have that they can agree with. Probably not, but it's the closest they'll get to a conversation their psychotic, simple minds can agree with. The world is full of disagreements. Why can't we just go get along? Well, first off, I say the sky is blue. All the trolls say the sky is red. What are you going to do about the trolls? Are you going to force them to believe the sky is blue when they say that it's their right to believe the sky is red, and then they attack anybody who doesn't believe the sky is red? So what are you going to do with Ukraine, who refuse, and Russia? Both refuse the reality. And of course, the Kumbaya Ukrainian supporters, none of them will go to Ukraine. Now, both countries' economies continue to suffer. This is a war of attrition, and the state of the war is now directly linked to economic realities. Now, overview. The Russian economy has slowed year on year since 2022. It was already in decline before that. GDP growth fell to 1% and hovers between 0.7 and about 1.2, 1.3. I can't quite make it out, but 1% is the medium. So 0.7 to 1.3. And this is according to the World Bank, not according to Russia. Now, the biggest decline was in the first 6 months. We've yet to see the Trump sanctions. So for now, Russia remains in a high-interest, tight monetary policy. Borrowing costs are extreme because because China will only loan money to Russia at a premium, and it's probably one of the few sources of finance they have outside of the private banks. And the private banks again are mercenary. They have high costs and the high cost of borrowing. Now, there is both internal and external strain on the economy. Falling Chinese economy means less imports from Russia. Russia is also under economic attack from China, with Chinese companies stealing Russian technology, directly competing with Russia, and undermining Russia, including fake Russian goods. Sorry. Now, the World Bank has noticed that it has, and as all other institutions outside of BRICS, have ceased any active programs in Russia since March 2022. So there is no more sanctions to be had. They are at 100% sanctions. The only further sanctions that can be added, as noted by Lindsey Graham, is to add to tariffs. That's all they've got left. Well, that and individuals, but the chances of individuals leaving Russia are very slim indeed. And if they do, they're not travelling outside of BRICS. You've made it quite clear, most of the world has made it quite clear, long before the invasion, that they hated Russia. The media has engaged, many have noticed, the media has engaged in a hateful campaign against Russia, white men in particular, Christians, native Europeans, and despite all the warnings, we have now the war that the left wanted, and the left admit they wanted war. This is their glorious revolution. Of course, none of them will fight in it, of course. They don't want the blood on their hands. Because if they fight in the war, it means they're a target. A legitimate target. That's why they're cowards and always remain cowards. They always get others to do their dirty work. Because unfortunately, there's always enough bad people in the world to carry out bad acts. And bad actors who fall for sophistry time and time again. Like, I'm not fighting for this life, I'm fighting for the next life. Yeah. And you just basically, what do? Can't we all get along? Well, first we have to have a set of 1 million parameters that everyone agrees with, and then enforce those parameters. No, we all can't get along. Grow up, you stupid children. So, Russia is hovering between a rock and a hard place. How bad is it? Well, I hate to break it to you, because most people hate the bad news, but Ukraine is under worse. Russia faces harsh pressure. Ukraine is classified as facing severe pressure. The Ukrainian economy has gone from a peak of 214.2 billion to an unknown estimate. But their growth rate is actually higher than Russia's. It's hovering around 1.8. It has barely changed. But national poverty in Ukraine rose to a peak of 41.6, worse than pre-Soviet era. It's the worst record since pre-Soviet. You can't count right. The Great Depression. It's that bad. Yeah. So their reconstruction estimates, 587.7 billion USD. Now, some put that figure actually at 8.8, but World Bank has revised that figure down. And I think that's because they have cheaper labour now. So that shows you how much their economy has fallen. Now, cumulative price increases averaged 50 to 70% for utilities, 80% for food from 24 to 25. Roughly 70% of households routinely borrow money. Debts are accumulating. No one's can pay their loans. Poverty continues to increase. Now, most of the damage or losses to the Ukrainian economy are direct. These are factory space, production machinery, but they also add the social economic costs of the war, and that adds another 666 billion if you want to count or the economic losses of people who have died since 2014. Annual inflation, 12.7%. What was Russia's again? Did they give me a figure? I don't think they gave me a figure. Oh no. They didn't give me a figure. That is odd. I know they're trying to counter inflation, but all right, what's the inflation in Russia? Searching. Okay. At a glance, currently, other than fuel, despite Russia has critical labour shortages with only a record low unemployment of 2.1%, with a official inflation rate of 6%, unofficially 13%. The official central bank rate is 14%. So the official central bank interest is 14%. So as long as no one borrows money, inflation is down. As soon as people borrow money, Russia's inflation goes up, which is, yeah. So prices, if you expand the economy, yes, prices have to increase to match the expansion. And the banks make money on the difference. But because, and they profit greatly and soak so much wealth out of the economy to stop runaway. Now, runaway economies have happened and they do lead to disasters. So we are trying to find the middle ground right now. And you do eventually reach a point like Russia or Ukraine did back in the mid-90s where you have almost full employment. So therefore you cannot grow. When you have now, the only thing the main difference between Ukraine and Russia is financial mobilization. The Ukrainian Relief and Recovery Trust Fund is now monitored and in possession. So the World Bank not only monitors, but they run the current Ukrainian Relief and Recovery Trust, although it's in partnership with the EU and ongoing public-private partnerships. BlackRock. Although BlackRock claims to have withdrawn, no, they've only withdrawn management. There's a difference. They want their money back. They haven't written it off or written it down. Now, Pacific Reconstruction is broken into energy, housing, and transport. The rest is under other aid programs. But right now, the key focus is rebuilding energy infrastructure, and this will actually bring the cost of rebuilding Ukraine down. But it will not. But it's keeping inflation high, plus wage freezes and low wages. They are the lowest in Europe. Ukraine continues to be unable to meet its obligations as the war consumes most of its budget. And as a result of Russian missile strikes, Ukraine has been unable to frequently attack Russia, and for the first time in 2 weeks, they've only been able to carry out an offshore drone attack. Basically, probably flew around or launched from somewhere, from a boat out here, but a drone did hit the Russian port. Though Sevastopol is also reporting power outages due to the Ukrainian attack. That's actually a carryover from yesterday. They still haven't repaired repaired from yesterday's attack. That is frequent. A lot of power repairs can take up to 3 days. It's the same in Ukraine. Depends on the shortage of, depends on the shortages, but generally the stockpiles, it's moving, and that's, yeah. Things have to come overland. They have tried several times, but they just can't bring enough over the Kursk bridge. They have to rely on overland routes, which is why Russia is adamant to keep this open and also as a buffer zone against Ukrainian attacks. Now, yes, I do see the blue. I'll get to that. But in retaliation for reports, Putin has stated tit for tat is now an official policy. Yeah, whatever you attack in Russia, they will attack in return. And we'll get to that later. But for now, Russia has hit several docks and facilities in Odessa in the last 16 hours, Kiev in the last 18 hours, between 48 and 12 hours ago, targets in Sumy were shelled across the entire frontier, and Kharkiv has been attacked over the last 24 hours, as usual, with glide bombs starting a day ago, and a couple of drone attacks recently. No, there was a drone attack. Well, the Russians said they had launched a drone attack, so that drone may have been shot down. So we'll write that off as... Sorry, that's not Kharkiv, is it? That's Sumy. Oh, yeah. Sumy, I'm pretty sure, was... No, they're all old. Okay. So no attack on Sumy today. Russia said they had launched a wave of attacks on Kharkiv, but drones appeared not to have made it. In the buffer zone, we have no real change. Sorry. As we get to northern Donetsk in Lyman, no real change, lots of fighting. As we go down, we have some progress in Koshnikovia and surrounds. The Russians are now in Drukunovia, made only small progress since yesterday. Most of the front, there has been no progress since yesterday. And as we go through, we'll get to... Now, there has been small losses on the Russian side. Sorry, a small amount of territory captured by the Russians has been lost. The Ukrainians claim to have liberated towns. Those are still contested. This is all in the grey zone. This is still contested territory. And some of these, these were Russians that weren't in. I can prove it to you. Let's go to 11th. See? Ukrainians put markers on the map for territory Russia's not in. Russia's not there, but Ukrainians still claim to liberate it. Doesn't mean Russian infiltrators, and so there has been a small amount of territory lost, according to Ukraine, and they've liberated all this territory according to Ukraine. And as I've just proven to you, Ukraine is, well, this is still contested, and Russia's still there fighting, and report by all accounts, the end result is, according to, which is it again? So BBC or Al Jazeera, no one is winning this yet. That was the quote, right? So this is on offensive. This is a launched offensive in the last, 24 hours, 17 hours. And no, they have not. And yeah. And some of the towns weren't under Russian control in the first place. And most of these markers, we'll put them there. And we'll see who believes them, because most people out there don't critically think. They accept blindly whatever they're told by so-called mainstream media authoritative figures. And then they try to justify it by saying, why would they lie to us? Well, it's the same reason why anyone lies. To feel good, to deceive you, and to gain advantage. Why else? But then, of course, the fourth reason. They can. But most of the front is unchanged. Overall, a net gain of 0.8 or something, according to estimates from and it is, a highly contested area. So this grey zone, whatever, it's very annoying when propaganda gets in the way. Now I'm here to tell you about the Empire of Elves. The Empire of Elves, one word, .myshopify.com is your one-stop shop for enchanting treasures based on my writing. In addition to supporting, you can support my channel by making a purchase today. Now, Russia's attack on Odessa has sparked yet another cry from Zelensky for more interceptors. Now, Russia's made fun of this and claims that Europe is holding out. But according to multiple sources, Ukraine is consuming about 5% of interceptors that are produced. And obviously, every time something gets through, they just want to launch more interceptors, right? They think, well, Now, doubling the amount of interceptors does not double the amount of interceptors. It reduces the chances increases the chances of intercept. And I don't know exactly if 3 or 4 or 5, but the thing is, what happens to the other interceptors? If they don't blow up in air, but even if they do blow up, you still have falling debris. And you always have that escalation, right? So what Zelensky really is asking for is to fire lots of interceptors, even though just so that he can say, no missile has fallen on Kiev today. That's it. It's all he wants to brag, doesn't think about the overall, the cost, or the reality is, if you burn through a lot of interceptors now, you won't have any in the future. So you've got to use them sparingly and wise. Now, is the Russian economy cracking? Some say yes, some say no. But Moscow's pockets are deep. They have more than $300 billion in reserves. The US-Israeli war on Iran has handed Russia a huge windfall because of high energy prices. And the world has had no choice but to buy Russian oil. Now, the United States has cut off both Russia and Iran, but most of the rest of the world hasn't. Even Europe, gas and oil flows through ports from Indian ships. Now, they call them teapot refineries, and they buy oil from various markets, and some of it is Russian. And it is making its way from India and China, mostly to local domestic markets. But there are European buyers and oil that goes through the Singapore Exchange from India and China to the outside world. No one person has enough machine oil, gas, natural gas, except for a few countries, which include Russia, the US, but China is heavily dependent. Iran is primarily an exporter. Most of the Central Belt countries around the equator, they usually have enough energy, but the further you get from the equator, the more gas you burn. And so, yeah, like Canada is one of the places that, even though they export some natural gas, most of it's domestic market. Now, when Putin called for tit for tat, and I think there was an interview yesterday, he was asked about European vessels, and he replied, if European states seize vessels with Russian cargo, Moscow will respond in kind wherever necessary. So he threatened to seize the Europeans if they plan to go ahead with seizing more commercial ships. However, this came hot on the heels of a Russian cruiser. On the Pacific Islands, where Russian Navy were conducting a drill. That's why he's dressed the way he is. He is on naval drill exercises. Apparently, it doesn't say here, but I was pretty sure in Indian defense news that India and China were observers or participants, however you want to look at it. NATO is making inroads in the region. New political alliances have shifted. They're talking about the growing shift in Japan's policy as expanding NATO. Yeah. Well, Putin's using the justification is, well, if you can do it, so can I, basically. It's up to you to decide, but I've always said, and I've always warned you, anything you do to Putin, he will respond, and he'll try to escalate it. That's one of the most fundamentals about his personality. He is an escalator. He rarely disescalates, although he can if it's to his advantage. He prefers to escalate situations. He is not one-dimensional, as most people seem to forget. Now, Politico has said Zelensky has fumbled the Belgrade trip. I can't find much on this. So far, there is silent tension between Serbia, Ukraine, and Albania over Kosovo. Kosovo wants to be independent. And isn't it an irony that Ukraine will not recognise Kosovo's independence, which upsets the Albanians who... But remember, Albania invaded Kosovo. Sorry, Albanian Muslims invaded Kosovo. Don't forget, Muslims invaded Albania first. And the naive chumps just can't reconcile their beliefs. Now, if you want to... Now, you probably have to go way back on this, back to 2022, about a man who allegedly advises Putin. And there was and Fyodor Lukyanov has been accused of being a Putin advisor, but he's more a Western critic, but he is chairman of the Russian Council of Foreign and Defense Policy and editor-in-chief of Russian Global Politics. So does he influence Putin? Well, people read his papers and make up their own mind based, and I would say most of the time. So what he's saying is that he doesn't advise, he observes. And his observation is that the transatlantic order is weakening. Moscow cannot afford to wait for Western divisions to resolve the Ukrainian conflict, that they must resolve it themselves. And it is the fact that the French and Anglo-Americans cannot get along, and they haven't got along since the end of World War II, that France was reluctant to join NATO. France does not fully participate in NATO. France, however, is right that you do need go-it-alone exercises and NATO exercises and European exercises. You need to account for the contingencies. I think a lot of NATO critics like to always claim there's a division where there is actual contingencies and, let's be honest, deception programs. I think publicly, though, all the way back to Mitterrand, and probably even before that, most French presidents' public position was to be as annoying as possible. Probably de Gaulle, since de Gaulle, I don't think there's been a French president ever that hasn't been an impossible, annoying asshole. The French love them. The French love the socialist ideology. It's why they rushed to headlong into World War I to enforce their ideology on Germany, because they thought Germany was slipping from their cession obligations. So you have this, I think, a genuine misunderstanding. The Cold Wars are not ended. Yeah, the Cold War ended and the Western system endured. Why? Because it's strong. It's stronger than he understands. That the strength of the capitalist system is in the belief of each and every individual that they have rights, and that the unfortunate part is the left just can't stand when someone else does better than them. And so often you have dilettantes like Hassan Piker who want to pull up the ladder behind them, just like the boomers pulled up the ladder behind them in the 70s and 80s by making competition harder, by making sure that big business received big discounts and skewed the wholesaler. Steve Jobs did this. He pulled up the rug. Well, on the surface level, the cost of electronics was cheaper, but the bulk purchase rate was much higher. So Apple got a much greater discount than everyone else, and thus drove many companies and eventually their suppliers out of business. But they didn't care, because every time someone went broke, whether it's insulators or circuit boards, there was always a dozen other companies who would grow and absorb. And pretty much Apple's collectivist model of doing business, and that's the thing. A lot of private businesses are run as massive conglomerates, and that is a communist collective. And so they see the communist collective as beneficial, but again, it's beneficial to the few at the top. It's capitalism, but with a big, hard monopoly. That's what communism is. It's capitalism with a big, hard, government-backed monopoly. Often and when the corporations, that's socialism, where the government controls the production, but it's communism when the government owns production, and fascism is when the government marries or merges with private enterprise. So what we see is from socialism to fascism to communism. And we're seeing that in New York right now. We're seeing that in parts of the world where, while you may point at Putin, there are three fingers pointed back at you. And European socialism is the worst of them all, because they are quite willing to use others, Ukraine, the US, even Russia, as proxies in their program to destroy others, because the only way to grow their economies is to destroy others. Now, Russian forces have advanced only a little bit, and that is the same every time, because that is Russian policy. They have built a military model based on the failures in Afghanistan. Sorry, start again. They've built a military model based on the early successes in Afghanistan, the later failures in Afghanistan, the early successes and later failures and ultimate successes in the Chechen wars, and then earlier conflicts and failures and setbacks in Syria have further influenced current operations. So it is a delicate military balance. If you advance too far and too fast, you find yourself with too many civilians to process. If you advance too far and fast, you find yourselves with long supply lines that are less guarded because you spread your troops thinner. So the further you advance, the more it takes to secure your supply lines. So the only way and the fastest way to wear down the enemy is logistics, not the factories, logistics. Because if you bomb the factories, they can rebuild the factories. But if you make them work hard for days to build a tank, and as they're sending those tanks on the front line, they get destroyed or damaged, that's a bigger economic setback than just blowing up the factory. So, overall, smudge on a map. That is all this is a smudge on the map. But every day, Russia keeps smudging that map, smudging that map, smudging that map. And before you know it, they're at the gates of Dukuvnia. And Ukraine is getting desperate by putting flags on a map where they are not even fighting. But they have pushed back in two areas. So they've pushed back a little bit here, but not by much. And we have seen this before, right? How many times has Russia lost a little bit of territory and then a few days later? Now, this is one of the few places where they've lost territory and have not regained it. And they have lost a lot of territory here. Remember, this was a sea of red. They were laying siege to this area. And they're pushing back. And they've been pushed back. This is one of the hottest contended areas. Why? Well, Ukraine has said it, right? They want to race to Mariupol, cut this corridor in half, and isolate Crimea, forcing the end of the war. That is what they've said. I forget who said it. Might have been the Fedorov. Now, various policies that are accredited to others, I think are now policies of Zelensky, and the media just keeps putting other people's name on it. And that's why we're seeing so many arguments, is when Zelensky needs a fall guy whenever something goes wrong. Oh, that was Fedorov's idea. Fedorov can't dispute it because that's what the media said. And if he goes to the public and says, no, that was Zelensky's, it makes him even look weaker. Zelensky's just manipulating everybody. And it's easy to do when you have the media on your side. It's so easy to manipulate through lies and gaslighting when the vast majority don't want to know. They want just bury their head in the sand and look at the sports reports. Bread and circus. Thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe. Please support the channel. I would love to bring you comprehensive news, of course, but that requires financial support. YouTube revenue is down. All revenue is down. And then I need audience support through Ko-Fi, Patreon. Now, I have a few wonderful loyal patrons. I hope you would join them over at Future Fantasy, one word. And buy my books, buy my merch. I appreciate each and every one of you. See you in the next video, and bye for now.